Hello and welcome to everyone to another episode of Smart Talks by the Elizabeth Smart Foundation. I'm Elizabeth Smart and I'm here with my co-host Mio Strong. And today we are very, very lucky in having Jolene with us. Jolene has an incredible story, but not just an incredible story, she's an amazing human being. She has become an advocate. She's moved on with her life and she's really become a role model for, I would guess, probably everyone that meets her. And so I am extremely excited to have her with us today. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited to just to have an amazing conversation about something that I know for all of us is so it's so personal and so important to get the conversation out there.
Absolutely. And if you don't mind me asking, do you mind just giving a little backstory on yourself?
Yeah, so I grew up in Nebraska. I was a farm kid. We did chicken and cattle and corn and 4-H and everything like that. And had, I think, from the outside really kind of this idyllic Midwest upbringing. My parents got a divorce, and we had at that point, my mother and sister and I had moved into town. And during that process, there was a family friend that had always been very close to us, but really stepped up, or that's what it looked like from the outside. He stepped up and was there to help, put in a ceiling fan, to give me a part-time job, to do all of those things that we needed and really gain trust. I mean, he had a key to our house. My mom didn't think twice about letting him give me a ride somewhere. And what no one knew, and I don't know if this is like the same for you, but I can tell what happened to me a million times over, and I still will get this like feeling in my gut and tear up, or a little bit, shake a little and have to stop. But what nobody knew, and what for me in that moment surviving looked like, was that he very much groomed me, and then would sexually abuse me and rape me when he would maybe give me a ride back from having babysat his children, when I would work part-time at a store that he had. And I just didn't think I could say anything. I thought that if I said anything, there would be this shame on my family, that all these things that I wanted for myself and for my future, to go to college and all of those things, would suddenly be gone. And I remember the language that he would use was that it was, you know what you did. You know what you did. And so very much in my child's mind, right, all that blame came on me. And all I saw was a man that was a teacher, was a business leader, was held up in our church as an example of what being a Christian was. And to reconcile those things, I just didn't know how. And so for me, coping and surviving was really about, like, I'm going to build this wall and I'm going to take all of this and I'm just going to shove it back there. And that's how I'm going to just move on with my life. Walls back here, everything else goes forward. And so I went on to college, went to Northwestern, so just north of Chicago, kind of did the, like, I'm moving away, I'm going to get my distance, and started a career as a television reporter. During that process, I had come back to be somewhat closer to home, to be near my grandparents at the end stages of their life. And also met this guy. So I was a TV reporter. There was this camera guy that made me look really tall. I'm not even 5 feet tall. And with Nate, it was the first person that I just had this unequivocal trust with. And I just felt so safe with him. But that said, I couldn't process still what had happened. And, time kind of went on. Nate will tell you that he knew something was there. I would wake up with night terrors, and so he's like, I knew something was there, but I never wanted to push until you were ready. In 2008, I was at this point out of TV. I was working corporate communications. We were starting a couple businesses. I was getting my MBA, and I had my first meeting with my advisor. And we sat down and we were talking about towns and places. And she used to live where I grew up. And she starts bringing up these names. And she says a name. And she stops and she says, "What happened to you?" And like, I was like, nothing, right? Nothing. I don't know. What are you talking about? No, nothing. I went back that night and it was like a wrecking ball had hit that wall. And I cried and I cried and I cried. And now, what I didn't know then, when I said to her, what did I do? How did I signal? And she had spent many years working with victims of sexual violence and domestic violence. And she said, there was something, I can't tell you what it was in your demeanor. And it prompted me to ask. And I always say that it was God's hand too. Right? He put me there to be with her. But I didn't know how to process everything. And I think for a lot of survivors, this is a part of my story that I think is really important to hear, because we don't always talk about how low can go. And for me, low went to the point where I was driving home from work one night and I just thought, I can't do this anymore. I don't know how to handle the pain. And I walked up the steps to our condo. I just thought, you know what? I'm just putting an end to it. Like, it wasn't that I wanted to die. I didn't know how to live. Like, I didn't know how to live in this suffocation of feelings, and in some ways lack of feeling. So I went home, I took all kinds of pills, I crawled into bed, and I thought I'll meet my maker, right? And I will leave my family without the pain that I thought I would inflict on them. And I woke up the next morning, and we had these wooden blinds and light kind of, in South Dakota when it's February and there's a ton of snow, there's just this ethereal light, and the light was coming through, and I woke up and I look over and I'm here. And just like in the depths of my soul, I felt like God said, I'm giving you another chance. I'm giving you a chance to put purpose to your pain. Like, that was what was on my heart and what I heard from him. And I went into therapy. I say, I've power lifted. I've done all kinds of crazy, like, physical things. The hardest workout I've ever had was therapy, like the mental work. And then I came to a point where I wanted to confront my abuser. The way the statute of limitations worked, that wasn't necessarily a legal option to do anything. And so on January 15th, 2011, I got into a car. Nate came with me. He's dressed in all black, right? He's got like good husband, and he's all ready. He's got black hoodie, black stocking cap, this whole thing. And we drove to his house. And both before and after, I had Nate record me, because I knew it would be one of the most pivotal moments of my life. And I would want to look back and watch someday I guess, the victim that I was and the survivor I became in between those moments. And I walked up, and I rang the doorbell, and he came out. And this nightmare of a man, who was and will always be that, was also before me as this weak, pathetic old man. And I looked at him and I said, I know what you did, and I will not be quiet. And that was all I needed. Like, I had to take my power back. What he said before or after any did not matter. And we got into the car, and I cried and I cried and I cried. And that night I slept like I hadn't slept. I can't even tell you how long. Like, it was a rest that the only way I can describe is it came with that peace that passes understanding, right? Like, my soul was well. And I really knew I wanted to give a voice for victims and survivors. I knew that for me, having told the story of other people, having been a TV reporter, I knew that the thing that I could do, that I could give purpose to, was to share my story and to be an advocate. So I started sharing my story. I started speaking publicly. And out of that, in 2012, went before the legislature in South Dakota, and we removed the statute of limitations on criminal rape.
Wow.
Which I am just like,
Is amazing.
I'm so proud of that moment too, because it was before Me Too, and it was before Jerry Sandusky, and it was before all of those things. And I'm just really proud that we had folks around us that understood that the statute of limitations empowers perpetrators and hurt survivors. And then in 2014, South Dakota passed Jolene's Law, and Jolene's Law created a 10-year strategic plan for the state of South Dakota, initially to end child sexual abuse. We've expanded that now to use the definition of child maltreatment. And that work is day-to-day being handled by a state agency that we have created called the Center for the Prevention of Child Maltreatment, who is tasked with the mission of ending child maltreatment in South Dakota. We have done, out of that action plan, regional reporting centers, because we are a very rural community, K-12 education, creating majors and minors within our higher ed system, where people can actually study specifically child maltreatment as a major. Eventually, where we're on the path to, probably in the next year or two, is that any student at a South Dakota higher education facility or school that has a major that relates to children, which is about anything. If it's elementary ed or criminal justice, they will have a required 3-hour course in child maltreatment and trauma, so that before they graduate, we know that they've got that baseline. And we've trained upwards of close to 30,000 people in South Dakota about how to be mandatory reporters and what trauma means and how it impacts children and families and communities. We've done that in about 18 months. So we're continuing to do all of that work, it's purpose to pain. And I probably took way longer than I expected. I sometimes forget how much there is to all that happened.
No, that was perfect. And I mean, just like sitting here, I just feel like that morning that you woke up and, there was your ethereal light, and you felt like God said, I'm giving you a second chance, and now let's give your pain a purpose. I mean, I guess I could be wrong, but to me, it seems like you have certainly done just that. I mean, this is amazing. And what big strides. I mean, in the last 18 months, that's what you've been able to do. My goodness, like, what have I been doing wrong for the last decade?
You have been doing a lot, both of you. Oh,
because that is amazing. Have you seen, or has this agency, the state agency tasked with ending child maltreatment, have they noticed statistics dropping since these implementations been implemented? Have they seen numbers go down, or is it still early? early days, or has that information not been gathered yet?
So what was really interesting for us was very first meeting we had of Jolene's Law, everyone's sitting around a table and someone goes, okay, so how many people have been sexually abused in South Dakota in the last year? There's silence. And all of a sudden someone goes, oh, well, for Child Protective Services, we have this number, but it's not what the prosecutors use, and da-da-da. And I felt sick to my stomach. Like, we couldn't even put a number to this. And I am a big data-driven person. Let's make our decisions based in data. And so what we ended up doing was really, out of that very first meeting, we said, we have to figure this out. We have to know what that number is. So we brought together all the different places across the state that reported, and essentially through CPCM, which is Center for the Prevention of Child Maltreatment, we brought all that data together so that now we have a baseline. And so we have a baseline of 4,000 children in South Dakota every year are reported to be sexually abused. We know that that number statistically is tracking up, but we don't see that as a sign that we are not doing our job well. We see that as an indication that we always knew the numbers, the reporting would go up because we were getting kids help. And that that the end goal is that it plateaus and we start coming down. But we've seen those numbers coming up. We have seen, just tracking statistically what we've done in surveys from schools and educators and faith communities, how many more people understand just the basic, I need to report, not even just my legal obligation, but my moral obligation to report and to not even question it, right? Like, your gut says it, you call it in. We want to get people to that stage, and we are seeing that happen more and more.
That is so great. And I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen? They're wrong. Actually, I think the worst thing that can happen is that they're right. I mean, hallelujah if they're wrong. But I mean, if they're right, what did they just do? They just rescued or potentially saved a child's life, or at least ended a nightmare that's been going on for who knows how long, and hopefully prevented more abuse from happening in the future.
That's what we want people to understand. It's a child's life, and and everything that comes with that, and not just right in this moment, but for the rest of their lives. That it is, I had someone say to me once early on, what you have is a chronic disease. Think of it like that. You didn't ask to be diabetic. You didn't ask to get cancer, right? People don't ask for those things, but you know that for the rest of your life, you will manage it, that you will have good times and you will have bad times. There are times of year that bother me. I cannot, I can't listen to a Pink Floyd song. It was what he would used to play. And so those are things I will always have to manage.
And I've actually never thought of it as a chronic disease before, but I actually really I think that comparison is a really probably a pretty accurate comparison. I mean, I don't know. What do you think, Mio?
Yeah, I really like that comparison. And several times listening to Jolene, I've had chicken skin goosebumps from what you said, because it just resonates so much with me. And I wrote down 2 quotes of yours, but that whole, it wasn't that I wanted to die, it was that I didn't know how to live. I think that is such an accurate, I mean, I've been there. That was exactly how I felt. I didn't have the words to express that. And that second chance of putting purpose to your pain, I'm just so inspired by listening to today. And all of your analogies are making perfect sense. I know they're resonating with our audience. I'm so glad you're sharing your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, it's tragic how common it is. And what's even more tragic is not just how common it is, but how so many people have felt ashamed and embarrassed, and then they hold it inside, and it just is slowly killing them. It's preventing them from living life.
Mm-hmm.
It's stopping them from, having the best possible life that they can have. I mean, because every memory moving forward is tainted because they have all of this poison trapped and bottled inside them that they never asked for.
Yeah, and I think also it's along those same lines of that comparison. I mean, there's treatment, there's hope, there's recovery, there's remission, there's cures, there's all these positive things that we can also help people see. The chemo or whatever it is that is going to help you, the therapy, the family support, all the key things that we talk about throughout these podcasts are different ways. It doesn't work for everybody. Radiation for one, cancer is not going to work for the one that, surgery is required. There's just so many options though. That's the important thing. There are lots and lots and lots of treatments.
And I actually really love how you talked about how, you've done powerlifting and you've done these crazy physical things, but the workout you ever had was in your therapy sessions, because I think a lot of people, and honestly, I was totally guilty of this. But in my mind, I was like, oh, well, therapy just means you're weak. But actually, I have since radically changed my mind. And this was many, 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 many years ago. This is not a recent thought. Just for anyone who had any question at all, this is coming from a very big age of ignorance in my life. But I just love that you talk about how it was the hardest workout that you've ever had. Just over the last few weeks, as Mio and I have been recording and filming these different podcast episodes, we've had a variety of different therapists come on and talk about the different fields that they specialize in. And I think if I've learned anything, I've learned a ton. I'll just say that to begin with. But there is different kinds of therapy for as many different people as there are, it seems like. But I have come to respect these survivors who seek help, who believe that it will help them, and who are willing to open themselves up to that vulnerability again and to overcome it. If anything, I believe, and I totally feel, and I feel like if you go to therapy, if you believe in it, if you, find what fits for you, that is definitely a sign of strength, because like you said, it's the hardest workout you've ever had. I think that just goes to show how powerful and how really life-changing it can be.
And I think too, for folks to understand that you may not find the right type of therapy, or you may not find the right therapist that's right for you the first time out. I think it's kind of like, I guess, dating. I don't, I'm not sure. Apparently dating now is completely different. But I have friends that they went through 20 different therapists until they found the one that was right for them. And I think if it's not the right fit, you move on. And that folks need to hear that too, that just because you walk in and are supposed to see someone and they're the best in your entire community doesn't mean that they're the best for you.
I think I kind of fell along those lines, although it was just, I want to say it was like the day after I got home. And I think I've shared maybe this story on other episodes that I recorded. Maybe not. Can't even remember now. But just to bore everyone, I'm going to share it again. I remember, it was like a day after I got home, maybe 2 days after I got home. I was taken to one of the children's advocacy centers here in Utah. And I didn't really know what was going on. I just been told that I needed to go talk to these two psychiatrists. And they were both psychiatrists. So in my mind, I was like, well, psychiatrists help you with mental problems or mental illnesses, or they help you, so that's therapy, right? So this must be like what therapy is. I wasn't really fully understanding what it was. I just knew I had to go into them, tell them what happened, and then I wouldn't have to go to court. They could go to court for me. So I know it seems pretty clear, like clearly you were going in just to tell them what happened, not actually get therapy. But in my mind, I was like, oh, well, they're psychiatrists. So, they're doctors, or, they're practitioners. So this must be what it's like. And I remember walking in there and straight off the bat, I felt a little bit demeaned. I felt a little bit I don't know, what is that word? Just a little bit like, I don't know, like they offered me a stuffed animal. They're like, oh, here, you can have a stuffed animal. You can hold on to this stuffed animal, while you're in there talking, and it can be a source of comfort to you. And I remember thinking, I don't want a stuffed animal. Like, I just survived 9 months with two monsters, and I didn't have a stuffed animal to hold then. Pardon me, but why the hell would I want one now? And so I didn't take a stuffed animal, and they're like, okay, come in here, talk to these two psychiatrists. And I went in there, and lo and behold, they were two men, two middle-aged men. I had just been rescued from a middle-aged man and his middle-aged wife. But they were both of them were very clearly religious, which, like, good for them. Good. Like, I'm not trying to, like, discriminate or, like, throw negative aspersions on them practicing their religion at all. Like, good job. I am, like, great. But for me, that was a little bit traumatic, and they weren't to know that. But I mean, the last 9 months I'd spent with my two captors who used religion, manipulated religion to control me. So it was like these two middle-aged men. They were very clearly religious. And not only that, but then they started, like, asking questions, and I was very shy and I was very quiet. And when I started to tell them what happened, it wasn't enough to accept it in, like, the words that I felt comfortable using. I mean, they wanted, like, me to get right down to the nitty gritty. It wasn't enough to say, like, well, he molested me. Well, he raped me. Well, yes, I know what rape is. Like, he stuck his thing in me. He forced it in me. And they're like, well, can you say the body parts? And it wasn't until I finally said he physically forced his penis into my vagina repeatedly that they were like, okay, yeah, you know what rape is. And that was just, like, so traumatic, and I was so ashamed, and I was so embarrassed to have to say it in front of these two men. And I mean, I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel comfortable. And I was like, well, these two are psychiatrists, so if that's what, like, help is, I don't want help. And for the record, that's not what help is. And things have certainly changed a lot in every advocacy center I've ever been to since then. So that is not the way things are still run. That was just my experience back then that immediately made me think, nope, I don't want this. And my parents started panicking. They're like, what do we do? What do we do? So they went to see, like, a therapist, a counselor, and the counselor was like, it's okay. Calm down, like, take a deep breath. And honestly, I think it was pure inspiration on his side when he was like, just make sure you're taking care of yourself, because one day will come when she's going to need you, and you need to make sure you're in a mental space that you can be there for her. So I think that was pretty good advice that he gave them. And now looking back, and especially having talked to so many therapists, as I've, like, learned, I just think, wow, I mean, if only I'd really understood what it was, I mean, what a difference that could have made for me.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, like you were saying, we have good days and we have bad days, and especially on those bad days. I mean, what a help that could have been.
And I think it's interesting. You talked about kind of faith and religion, and for me, and that was used very much as a tool. It was a weapon, and I think sometimes and I would just very broadly say the church, right? I think that at times the church forgets how, and this was at least for my case, I've talked about this with pastors, that church can be a traumatizing place for victims, and that kind of sometimes how we perceive faith or religion or even a Bible passage, or however that may look, is very different when it has been weaponized against us. And I would love to see our faith communities, and it's an area we're working on, is bringing together those faith communities to have the language of how to talk about these things, and also to just be more aware that walking inside the doors of a church should be an incredibly healing and safe place. For many folks, it isn't. And so when I hear you talking about that, it definitely resonates with me.
I mean, I know this is a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I'm going to take a couple steps down it just for fun. But I feel like, it's okay. Like it's okay what you decide to believe or to follow as far as like, premarital sex or, whatever those are, that's okay. Like that's your prerogative to believe that. That's fine. But how about when we have these kinds of lessons or when we have these kinds of teachings, we just add a little bit more education in as well. Like, for instance, so I grew up Mormon. I still am Mormon, in which we were taught, like wait until marriage to have sex. Like it's very special. It's something you do with your spouse, and you save yourself for your spouse. Which I never had a problem with it. That was fine. Like I wasn't like looking to go out and have sex. But when they taught that to me, they didn't teach me about exactly what consensual sex was versus rape. Nobody ever told me what rape was. They just talked about how if you didn't have sex, or how if you didn't save yourself, how if you didn't wait until marriage, how then that was, you were making yourself dirty. You weren't as pure as you could be. And then, so that just made me think, after I was raped, well, I'm not clean anymore. I'm not pure. I mean, rape is I think we can all agree it's a very vile act already, that whether you're religious or not, there's no amount of showers that can wash that feeling away. But then you add this extra layer of like religious condemnation on top of you, and it just compounds things and makes everything worse. So I've spoken a lot about this subject, and I mean, like, I am totally respectful of what, the different faiths believe or what they encourage or what practices they want. But I just would ask that as they're teaching whatever it is that they want to teach, that they also acknowledge, there is absolutely a difference between consensual sex and everything else. There's absolutely a difference between violence and abuse and loving intimacy. They are not the same thing. And from the outside, it may look like it's the same actions, but the feeling and the intent and the emotion behind it is what separates it 100%. I don't know. I could keep going, but for time's sake, I won't.
I love hearing that perspective from you, Elizabeth, because I have a daughter right in the middle of puberty, and we don't go to church. I mean, so I love hearing this point of view, and it also resonates with me as a mom that these are conversations I could be having as well, and I will be having. All of the things we talk about, like, what is enthusiastic consent, what is rape, what is, abuse, what is trauma, all of those things. I am curious, Jolene, we talked briefly before about you have a child, a very young 3-year-old child. I'm curious, as a parent moving forward, what are your thoughts? Obviously 3-year-old is there's not an age appropriate matter right now, but what are you going to do moving forward as a parent, just differently than how you were raised?
I think one of the things I really had to reconcile, and I have to reconcile with, I think as a parent, almost every day, is understanding that I can't keep her in a bubble, that she will be around people, and that I have to, at some point I have to trust that I may not be there, but I have taught her well, and and I've essentially vetted people. One of the things that we as a family decided before Liberty was even here was that in this family we talk about our body parts by what they are. Like that is a kind of a universal rule for us. And so ever since she was little, it was, you have a vagina. And, we wanted to have that language for her, just to empower her and to know that. And I think, as time goes on, one of the things that I know as she gets older, that I'll have to talk to her about is obviously what happened to me, but also, there are bad days. And how do you explain that to your child? How do you have them understand that this is a really, mommy's having a bad day and she's very, very sad, and it's not anything to do with you. And so as part of that, kind of, I guess, laying the groundwork, one of the things that we do is we talk about our feelings all the time. We really try and make sure that feelings are something we have conversations about. And we also, our family has 2 rules, and our 2 rules are respect and responsibility. And part of what comes with that, and I think it's a lot of my experience, is that we respect our bodies and we respect other people's bodies. And so we talk a lot about bodies and space and, what's safe and what isn't. And I think one of the things that we're working on right now, and I've been working with some folks actually nationally, is about parenthood and especially motherhood. And I know you've both been through this experience. For me, I knew that pregnancy could be triggering at points. I knew that there were things about it that could be hard. And so one of the things that we're working on is creating a toolkit for primary care and OBs, that they understand how to talk to survivors as they're, going in for those prenatal checks, for addressing issues that may come up, for understanding that there may be triggering moments in an exam or in the delivery room. And also just making healthcare providers aware of what resources are out there and how to talk about it, knowing that, survivors may have a greater likelihood of postpartum depression or other things triggering. And so that we make sure that we use that time to put both the mother and the child in the best place possible. And I think that's really important too, is to understand that we are survivors across our entire lifespan. And I think, I would be interested in knowing from both of you how your parenting has been influenced, or how you think it's been influenced by it. But, I think for me, I will struggle with trust. And I say I'm very much a control person. But how do I teach my child to have the voice I wish I had? And I don't have an answer for it.
I mean, I think I probably fall pretty close in line with you. My children are 5, 3, and 1, and I mean, we also use anatomical body parts, names, but I mean, for me, I think one of the most important things to instill in my child is that, or my children, is that I love them no matter what, and that there's nothing anyone else can do to them, or that even they could do themselves, that would make me stop loving them. So, I mean, every time, one of them gets into mischief, and then, we have a talk and they start crying, or, they have to have a little timeout, or, they don't get their treat because they were asked multiple times not to do something, and then they throw their tantrum. I mean, I think after every tantrum, I always come back, and I always come and I always hug them, and I say, I'll always say something like, you understand, what you did wrong, but I love you. Do you know I still love you? And my 5-year-old, she's like, yes, I know you still love me. Good. Because I'll always love you, and I want you to remember that. And so for me, making sure they really feel like I do have unconditional love for them, no matter how much mischief they get into, or no matter how many times they pull the cat's tail or the dog's tail, or fight with each other. Or no, my children are not perfect. They're perfectly imperfect. I want them to make sure that they know that I love them, and then I have lots of conversations with them that they can tell me anything that they want. And so my oldest, she's kind of realizing right now that if I ask her a question, like, oh, go tell your brother it's dinner time. Like, she can step out of the room for a minute and then she comes back and she doesn't actually have to tell him. And she'll be like, okay, I did it. And then I come back and I'll be like, did you really? I was like, I didn't hear you do it. I didn't hear you go upstairs. And she'll be like, I did. I'm like, no, like, did you really? And, eventually she'll say, no, I didn't. And then that's why we'll talk. And another one of those moments and I'm like, well, Chloe, honey, like, that's when you say you do something and you didn't, that's lying and that's not good. But if you don't do something, or if something happens, like, you don't have to hide it from me. Like, don't feel like you need to hide what's going on. Like, you can tell me and I promise, like, I will still love you. And so they're like pretty small things right now, but those are the conversations that I have a lot with my kids. And I think I probably border on the same with you, where I'm like, who's coming up to my house? Do I really want to let them around? Nope, not opening the door. Or, I have that constant struggle inside me, as well as wanting to protect them, but also wanting to prepare them for life, because obviously they're going to go to elementary school here in the near future. They're going to go to junior high and high school. They're going to move away when they go to college, and I won't be there to put a protective bubble around them. So yeah, constant struggle.
I love what you just said, though, about, that just distills it down to the very, very core of the way I want to raise my kids. And I've just been struggling with my 13-year-old lately, and struggling with how to help her. And like, is it taking away social media? Is it stricter rules? Is it a better schedule? Is it meditation in the morning with her? What is it that's going to help her see how much I love her, and how much that these little things don't matter that seem to matter right now? But Elizabeth, you solved my problem. It is just the fact that I love her and she can tell me anything, and that I am her rock, right? That I will be here no matter what. Like, I think that is such a powerful thing, and that is a hugely powerful thing that I was missing growing up with my abuser, was somebody that I felt like I could go to for anything, and that would love me no matter what. But yeah, you're so right, Elizabeth. It's that very core love, like, and steadfast, unconditional. It's only something I've understood as a parent, and conveying that is difficult, because I would smother her if I could and put her in a bubble, and but yeah, thank you for that. That's very applicable to my life right now.
Well, I would love to chat to you all day, Jolene. I feel like there's
Yeah.
I could have this go on forever, because I'm like, yes, like, let's.
I know. I'm hearing Mio say things. I'm like, okay, I want to know about teenagers. I want to get prepared.
Yes, but unfortunately, we are out of time today. So I wanted to say thank you again to you, Jolene. I have so much admiration and respect, not just for what you went through, but honestly for who you've become and how you've lived your life, and just for the person that you are, and that you keep on going, and you keep on getting up, and bad day after good day after bad day, that you don't give up. Because it's an incredibly courageous task to make yourself vulnerable, to open yourself up, to share your story. And certainly with us today, but to the scale that you have done, and that how you've gone after laws and you've advocated. And I just hope that everyone who watches this podcast, this episode, that they feel the same inspiration that I do, but that they also realize that it is possible. Like, Jolene is such a beautiful example of coming to a point of peace and happiness in her life. That's not to say she doesn't have bad days, but that she has good days, and that life is absolutely worth living. And That is true for all of us. I want so much for every victim and survivor out there to know that we all struggle, okay? I have my struggles, Mio has her struggles, Jolene has her struggles. I mean, trust me, there are plenty of days when I'm like, seriously? It wasn't enough to survive a kidnapping? Now I have to deal with this pile of crap as well? We all feel like that. We all have those days, but life is still beautiful and it is still worth living. And there is still peace and joy and happiness to find. So as you move forward with your life, please hold on to that. And if at the moment you can't quite find it in your life, just believe. Just believe that it will happen. Believe that you will find it, because that belief will help you to eventually find it. And it's something that it doesn't just come overnight. I mean, it's something that you have to continually want and work towards. So please never ever give up, because you are worthy to be happy. You deserve to find happiness and joy and love. You deserve all of those positive human experiences. We all deserve that. And please don't sell yourself short. Please don't give up on that. And please know that there is nothing that anyone else on this entire world can do to you that can take away your worth as a human being. And so with that being said, I want to say thank you again to everyone for tuning in. Special thank you to Jolene. It's just been an absolute pleasure. And God bless all of you. Thank you.